So, welcome to Semantic HTML. By the end of this lesson, I hope you will be able to explain the relevance of Semantic HTML and describe the correct use of semantic tags. Neat. Relevance of Semantic HTML, huh? So let's, a little bit of vocab. What are semantics? What does that word mean? Yep, semantics are the meaning of words. So our semantic HTML is HTML with meaning. What else could it possibly be? Div soup. What's div soup?
Apparently Reddit.com.
Yeah, shit. The man, like, you cruise around the web with DevTools open long enough, like, you're just gonna roll tears the whole time. So if let's see, do some examples. So if I open up an index.html file, I add the pragma at the top, lets us know we're using HTML5. What are the two required children for HTML tag? Head and body, knees and toes. All right, so I got head and body. What are the two required children of head? Title. And what was that? Meta. Yep. Meta char set. We'll talk about what a char set is one of these days, but not today. Cool. So I've got the outline of my HTML file. Div soup is one way to not be semantic. It's when your document is some variant of this. We'd say that's pretty darn unsemantic, because the meaning of whatever content that I put in there, I don't know. I haven't marked it up with any meaning. The definition of a div is it's a container for which there is no more specific match. Really, you're doing something that weird. None of the other 100 HTML tags more closely approximated the thing you were trying to do. Good gravy. So that's one way to be not semantic. And you'll hear me refer to that as div soup, and it makes me sad. So, what is a div?
Division.
Nope. Good guess. Well, like in meaning. This has a semantic meaning, kind of, also.
Class.
Nope.
Container.
Generic container. It's not an article, it's not free-form text, it's not a date, it's not a button, it's just something generic. I can't think of a more specific one, and so I gotta pick something. And so a div is a generic block level container. We'll talk about that in the CSS lesson. And anybody know the other generic container? The inline one? Span. Span and div are generic containers. Much like, think of this as like for each versus map. Where for each is unexpressive because it doesn't reveal your intent at all. With a map, you're trying to transform something. With a reduce, you're trying to accumulate something. With a select, you're trying to filter something out. But the for each, I'm just looping. I could do all of those things, but my intent isn't necessarily clear. Same thing with these two tags. Yeah.
So when I I was learning, like, doing HTML and semantic HTML, the reason we have semantic HTML is really for accessibility reasons. Like, it makes it as accessible for screen readers and all these other things. Is that why we use semantic HTML?
That's one of the reasons. So relevance to semantic HTML, one of them is accessibility. Talk about that more in a sec. There's other reasons. So div soup is one way to be not semantic. There's a second way, and if any of you were doing web programming in the late 90s, you probably did quite a bit of this. So we'll say this is div soup, not semantic. Frames were a thing. Other way you could do it would be something like, here is some text, and then you'd make a line break like that. Here is some more text, and then you only want like the carriage return, and so you'd BR, and then here is some bold text, and then we'd have italics. So all of these also not semantic. Anybody know why?
Because it's like hard coded, like you can, right?
I'll give you a hint. So this line is not semantic. The equivalent thing in semantic HTML would be that.
You're not saying what the sentence is.
Expand.
Like, it's literally just generic text on a page that doesn't tell you anything, but the P tag tells you exactly what it is.
Yep. What about this? Strong versus B for bold.
Strong like an HTML function or B for bold is like a CSS like function.
Oh, you're like halfway there. You're right in the neighborhood. What you got?
Strong implies emphasis, whereas bold is just a font formatting.
Bingo. So I can indicate that I want something to be strongly emphasized without necessarily indicating how that gets done. That might be bold, but there's like cultural context that sort of goes along with that. There's stylistic choices that you might choose to emphasize something in a lot of different ways. You can make the font bigger rather than just have more weight. You could surround it with more white space. A lot of ways you can emphasize something. So I'm saying what my intention is. I want this to be strongly emphasized versus saying how I want it to look. Meaning, presentation. Meaning, presentation. No wrapper around this. What's it for? Using the P tag to make like an extra line break. Visual, not semantic. Using BR to make a like carriage return. Visual, it's not semantic. Doesn't have anything to do with what the text means. If I wrap it in paragraph tags, I'm saying this is paragraph style text. And maybe my paragraphs have a big break between them. Maybe they don't. That's up to me.
Well, okay, I have a question.
Mhm.
Like how this relates to div soup, because like when I'm looking at Reddit this morning, like a lot of divs had specific like IDs.
Mhm.
So while div itself is meaningless, by adding those IDs, aren't you then making it semantic?
No. Great question. So this makes me so sad when I see this. I'll see something like article, header, byline, and they'll still use div tags and they'll mark them up this way. I don't understand what would compel someone to do that instead of article, header, and then like there's no byline tag, but there is a specific semantic tag for that. It's address. Like, we have tags for this shit. And it does make a practical difference which of these two. So, for one, so we talk about accessibility, we'll get that in a sec. But even if we set that aside, as a developer, which of these two is easier to fucking read? Like, it's so much clearer to follow somebody's intent when they use semantic tags. Because let's say you just got hired by Reddit. You open up that div soup. It's so hard to figure out where anything is, what it's supposed to be doing, what anyone's intention was. In a perfect world, it doesn't always go this way, but I think if you try for this, you can get a lot further than you think. In a perfect world, the semantic markup of content has literally nothing to do with how it looks. Even the order that these things happen in should be driven by like a hierarchy of meaning, not any one way that it happens to be presented. So a milestone that I'll use for that is, could I theme this? If I just delete the style sheet entirely, could I make it look completely different without changing the HTML? That indicates to me that I've done a good job semantically marking up the document without tightly coupling it to any one visual presentation of it. If you do that, you will have a much easier time styling things.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
So is part of the reason why people might be avoiding these more specific like tags like article, header, address, just because they don't know them?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's about 80% of it.
Okay.
Because HTML is pretty easy. You've got two-ended tags, you have single-ended tags, you have attributes. That's kind of all the syntax. Like, there's not that much to it, which leads a particular kind of like dopey CS bro to assume it's like kind of beneath them. Even like in this program, like we're not supposed to cover HTML in the program. It gets covered in the pre-work. I was like, what are you fucking talking about? This is actually really complicated because what something means, that's intense, but it's ambiguous. It requires interpretation. It requires like understanding how it will eventually be used. Not a thing that your local CS bro is especially strong in. Career changers, on the other hand, you've been out in the wild. You've talked to people that aren't computers in your life at some point. So this is your chance to shine. But yeah, making a choice about which tag is appropriate, you have to know a lot of like mushy stuff to do that well. But yeah, the HTML syntax is easy. Figuring out how to structure a document that can be styled a lot of different ways, harder. To wit, I'll give you an example of where I've done literally that. I continue to do literally that. Is if I... So this developed Denver site. This was last year's. We're building the current one right now. So this presentation of it, it's on a 9-column grid, I think. It's got this kind of goofy sidebar. It's got the hamburger menu thing there. If we go into mobile, generally works pretty good on mobile. So iPad 6 still works pretty good. This thing's down there. Cool. That's not two different pages. There's not like the mobile page and then the other page. It's not even like two wildly different style sheets. Basically the same shit. And here's the wildest part. The year before this, it looked nothing like this. Like completely different visually. I changed very little to no HTML. When we did this style, I just deleted all the style sheets, started from scratch. Really beneficial because I didn't have to rewrite any tests. Your tests like start breaking, you start moving elements around, deleting stuff. I didn't have to, any functionality we have around things like our payment system and stuff. It's how we make our money. Like, I don't want to fuck with that. The style sheets don't have anything to do with that, though. So if all I'm deleting is that, I have confidence that my app still works the way that I intended it to, the way that it did the year before. That's power. Comes from Semantic HTML. Because the meaning of what we're doing on this site hasn't changed. We have a call to action up here. We have a description of what we're doing. We have our demo reel. We have schedule. We have a ticket link. We have a thing of sponsors. I think the year before it was like we were doing one of those heavy center lines where these things were kind of like staggered side to side. The hierarchy's still the same, just visually presented differently. Cool. So we've talked about developer ergonomics, because it's also way easier to read something like that. I'll prove it. So if we look, this isn't like straight HTML, it's a Vue app, but if I go to something like the news page. The news page is a section of the site. It has a secondary heading. The primary heading is developed member. Secondary heading is conference news. And then there's a list of news items. Way easier to onboard somebody into this system than if every one of these things is a div and you have to kind of interpret it from the classes. So like, this could have just as easily been div, class, XL font, heavy, weight, 16. Except like if we were using Bootstrap or something like that, they make this stuff so hard to read. So it ends up being something like that. Okay, so I could do that to indicate how I want it to look. Or I could do this and then write that all H2s have these visual properties in my style sheet.
So you can have like a million IDs and a million classes.
Correct.
Super nice. Okay.
It is nice.
Okay, for the news items here, like those key value pairs, is that like for JavaScript read? What's that format?
That's Vue.
Oh, okay.
There is some JavaScripty stuff in there, but we tried to be really intentional about about using good semantic tags. And sometimes you still have to use divs. Like ticket details, date and location. There's not really good semantic tags for that, but they are separately grouped semantically. But if you just reach for the div every single time, lame. Because here's the thing, the tags don't have a whole lot, they don't do different things. Article doesn't have like some special property to it. In fact, we could make these tags like Broncos. Like that works. So if I have these 100 tags, there's basically no difference between most of them. All we have is the meaning. So
So you can have tags with whatever you want. The fact that there's like article or that's just position.
no, that is part of the HTML spec. And your browser has default presentations for that, which is why when you write an H1, it looks bigger and bold and stuff. So your browser has a style sheet. You can also just make stuff up.
Okay.
Your browser will show it. So we care about developer ergonomics. Let's talk about the accessibility piece. This is heavily focused on when we talk about semantics. Ergonomics. So, we talk about accessibility in this context. A lot of time we're talking about screen readers. If you have a visual impairment, yes, you can use the web. There's screen reader tools that will go through your document and talk you through the hierarchy, and you can respond to it. Now, if you have, oops, let me go back to where I was. Didn't I have another one? Thought it did. Oh, there we go. So, if I have div soup, the screen reader goes div, 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 div. Which one would you like? Womp womp. Except it actually doesn't do that. It goes dip, 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 dip. If you actually hear a screen reader, it is crazy fucking fast. Screen reader, what it sounds like.
Program at home when we are slowed down, but it's not a
Menu keyboard shortcuts button. Blank.
There it is.
Heading level 1 graphic accessible university. Banner end.
but if it very fast, and then but when we are reading technical content, then we go a little slower, we make more pauses.
Accessible university 1.
I have slowed down my screen reader program,
Banner. Heading level 1 graphic accessible university. Banner end.
but if it is, for example, about email, I can go
Faster, 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 faster. Main menu navigation region. Show menu keyboard shortcuts button. Blank. Above menu sub menu collapsed.
I can go that
Link
fast.
collapsed academics.
So, like, if you have a visual impairment, that's how you use the web. And something like that does not play nice with that at all. Use good semantic tags, two things. None of them say, like, article, header, address, and then, like, says who wrote it. But it also makes good assumptions about how to navigate the page, what order you meaningfully would probably go through the site in. If you put all your main site navigation inside of nav tags like you're supposed to, and you have a list of navigation elements, about page, and I want to navigate the page, the accessibility tools pretty good at helping you get to the navigation and tell you what your options are, if you mark them up correctly. Indeed. So let's check in on Domino's. How's Domino's doing? The new Domino site wasn't accessible. Almost made it to the Supreme Court. Woof. Let's see. All right. Guillermo Robles, who was blind, claimed in a U.S. district court in California that the pizza maker violated the federal disability requirements because he couldn't order pizza on his iPhone. The website doesn't work with his screen reader software. Yeah, that is a federal law. You have to have, if you are offering a service, you have to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities, including visual disabilities, including on the internet. Even if you're a scrappy startup, you don't do something like that, someone's going to sue you sooner or later. And, like, don't be a dick. Because, like, there's so many other reasons to do it, too. This is better fucking code. Just don't suck at your job.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, like, nav, for instance, is an example of a semantic HTML tag.
Mhm.
Is there a point of diminishing returns, which is to say, like, should we concentrate on learning like the 25 most frequent or 50 most frequent semantic HTML tags? And the
Oh, yeah.
Just the cherry on top.
Yeah, there's like, yes, and one of the things, the last thing we'll do in this lesson is I want you to spend some time looking at the element reference. Some of them are like right to left Chinese characters and like that kind of stuff. And so you should know, let's just kind of have a little Rolodex in your head that like, I'm in kind of a weird scenario right now. I should go consult the HTML reference. But yeah, there's some of them that use way more than others. Cool. So, one other thing, one of the reasons we care about semantic HTML, and it is machine readability. Developer ergonomics, accessibility, machine readability. So what I mean by machine readability is we go to Google, we look up Flatiron School. Cool. See how it has these like deep links on the site? You can do that with semantic tags. We go to Facebook. All these like deep linking options, even like the kinds of things that it's pulling to display about the page. If you mark up your site well, you get a lot of that kind of stuff for free. Also, if you have content that's like redistributable, use good article tags. Stuff like this goes a lot easier. You use the article tag. Article is a way of indicating that the content in this tag should be redistributable separately from this site. That would be like the case with like, you know, any kind of news article. Rapid tags, it'll figure out how to do that easily rather than having like your leader text being some like weird ad garbage you have on your site. What was that? Redistribute. So an example would be, if we go to kylecoberly.com, and so something like this, imagine that I had more shit in it. Let's say I want somebody to be able to put this on their site or show up in like an aggregator or something, not on my website. That's redistributing it. Now the real question, did I mark it up correctly? No, because it actually isn't independently redistributable, but there you go. Cool. So these three things, this is why we care about this. Developer ergonomics, accessibility, machine readability. What questions do you have about why semantic HTML matters? Yeah.
Is semantic HTML like relatively new? I just feel like it's just so uncommon on the internet. Like even when I Google it, there's just not. It doesn't seem like there's really as much stuff on it.
No. Like that's kind of the sad thing. I'd say semantic HTML came about with HTML5, which, among other things, so like the whole internet used to look like this. HTML5 was an effort to respect XML syntax a little bit better and also take away things like this. So the B and I tags are actually still in HTML, but they mean different things now. They have semantic meanings rather than presentational meanings. And so it's this massive reorganization of HTML. And I want to say the spec was finalized in 2011. I want to say it was proposed in like 2004. (2014) was when it was done. Started in 2008. Well, the first release came out in 2008. The working group 2004. Nailed it. I know my web history. So among other things, that was HTML5. So no, this isn't new. People are just that bad at figuring out what things mean. Yeah.
Do you have a good resource or doc that you use or that you might have for us?
I do, and that's what we're going to do next. Any other questions about why this matters? Cool. I want you to write it in your own words. I'm going to put 4 minutes on the clock. I want you, this is interview style. It's like semantic HTML. I've heard that word before. Well, why do I care about this? 4 minutes. Go. All right. So, anybody want to share what they wrote?
I'm excited.
Yeah.
So, semantic HTML is a practice of using as many descriptive, clear-intentioned HTML tags as possible provided by the HTML5 specifications. It is therefore the opposite of overusing less descriptive tags such as div and leaving all the explanation for the ID or class attributes to communicate. The idea is to have code that is easier for restyling, for developers to read, and for accessibility or scanning software to parse and determine meaning and function.
Yeah! Oh man, it actually made myself really busy with that. Well done. Yeah, update the Wikipedia article. Fuck yeah. Absolutely love it. Any last questions about the relevance of semantic HTML before we sit down? Cool. So I want you to be able to describe the use of semantic tags next. Yes, do I have a resource? Do I have a resource? Of course I have a resource, and you do too. It is called the Mdn Element Reference. So I want you to go to that in your web browser. And I want you to spend 10 minutes reading this page. This has every HTML element, a quick description of how it's supposed to be used. You can click on any of the tags to find out more about its intended use, including things like what's allowed in it, what it's allowed to have as a parent, that kind of stuff. And yeah, tons and tons of good stuff on here. And hopefully you'll get a sense that like not every one of these gets a ton of action. It also has the ones that we don't use anymore, like frame. Cool, so let's take 10 minutes, read through that page, and then after that we're gonna pair up and chat about it a little bit. Go. Yeah, you're in your TV wire right now. I forget. That's a Linux thing. Front to back. To X. TTY. Control Alt try. Control F2 or F7. Okay, try all your Fs. They're all just different terminals. One of them, yeah, so see your TTY one up there? Yeah. Pick one. This one? Yeah. So it's shifting between those. You just lose your X session.
When the computer closes it, it's that authentication it gives everything.
Pretty pretty. You can, okay, just do your regular login here. Whatever you log in your computer. Not your, like, your, however you log in, what, like the thing used for sudo, that kind of stuff.
Oh.
I guarantee there's not space in it. It's whatever shows up, like, on like the far left side of your terminal. Yeah. Their username. Okay. And your same password used for sudo. The other half of that.
It's helpful if it is. Like, I have my name, and then it's at, and then whatever I need my computer. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's the left side of that. but
Just
you
the
can
left
see-
side.
Correct.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
see. Alright. Thank you.
Okay, try restarting again. Yeah. Have no clue. Weird. So I saw your X session for just a second. What's this test? You know what that is? Okay. Yeah, man, that's hard if you don't know your username. Yeah, there's never gonna be a space in it. It's absolutely not that. probably lowercase. He's George. There, oop. No. That looks like a good Unix username.
I know that I have my name. I have to connect to it all the time. That's why I changed it to text.
Okay, do me a favor, do a hard shutdown. So it's usually like you hold the button in for 7 seconds or something like that, and then reboot from that.
Why did you repeat text?
This was awful. Right back here, huh? So 1804. Getting TTY on boot. All right, George, was it? It's case sensitive, but it's whatever you've been entering for suit.
Yeah,
All right, let's touch base on that. But yeah, we got to figure out that username. Cool. So here's what I want to do now. Let's. We're just about out of time. Shoot. Actually, let's do this then. Tell me about a tag that you found that was new to you. You're like, I'm going to use that tag. I didn't know that existed. Think of one to yourself for a sec. I'm going to call on someone. It's a tag that you thought was kind of interesting. Aaron, what'd you like?
I just like the code tag.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what is the code tag used for?
It displays its content style in a fashion intended to indicate that the text is short fragments.
Yep. So think like when you do triple ticks or something in Slack and it does the monospace formatting. So that's like the monospace formatting is like a good visual representation of that. You can imagine all kinds of different ways that you might want to set code apart. But now it's semantically indicated. Excellent. Zach, what'd you find? Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of interested on the Ruby tag. I'm
Yeah.
wondering what exactly like so any element represents a Ruby annotation.
Mhm.
Ruby annotations are for showing pronunciation of these characters.
Yep.
Maybe I was thinking of the RB tag.
Yes. So, Alice, do you know how that works? Sorry. Everybody's heads were down. So, Alice, are you familiar with Ruby annotation? So, the idea with this is that you can indicate a character and its tone. So, in East Asian languages, there's different tones that change the meaning of sound. So Alex, can you give us an example of like different tones for the same sound? No, in Thai.
Oh, I mean, in real tone, if we have like 5 tones.
Right.
Like in like my name.
Right.
we say like different tones.
So give us an example of like the 5 different tones in Thai.
Like my nickname is Five,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're not color, it can be Five. It's like five, 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 five. It's all different meanings.
Five different words.
Yeah.
So indicating that in script, difficult. So Ruby annotations are a way of doing that. So if you want to semantically mark something up that way, that's what the RB tag is for. Cool. Give me one more. Volunteer. Cool one you found. Ben.
The abbreviation was kind of cool. I
Yeah.
haven't figured out how to use it yet. It looked pretty cool.
Yeah. So what's abbreviation do?
It like underlines, so like the examples he gives is literally just HTML and it just gives an underline on it. And then you have to put a title tag, and I think, if I'm understanding right, like when you scroll over it, it'll show the title, which is the full, like, word or phrase or whatever, like the language.
Indeed. Yeah.
Footer, I think footer's been underrated.
Indeed. Footer, header, and main, those are like bread and butter elements. Those are ones that make it on almost everything that I do. Yeah. Button element. What's the button element for? No, not for linking. The anchor tag is for linking. What's the button tag for? An action. So, submit forms. Let's see. So, good for submitting forms, and otherwise taking some kind of action on the page. If you're linking to something else and it looks like a button, it's an anchor tag that's styled to look like a button. Totally doable, like not even especially difficult to do, but semantic difference between button and an anchor tag. One links somewhere, one takes some kind of action. Submitting a form, toggling something like that. Cool, and so that is describing the correct use of semantic tags. So as you are figuring out how you want to mark something up, that element reference, that's your best friend. Any last questions?
What do you do when you get hired into a job and you go and all HTML is like div 0x FBCD blah 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 blah.
Gross.
You can only you can't restructure everything and you write it
Mhm.
different. I mean, like I feel like we're gonna bump into this wild if like big names like Reddit and Google
Sure.
stuff with like garbage.
Absolutely. So step one, don't make it worse. So like when you're doing something, because 80% of the time says they don't know, you know. So when you're making an element, use the correct tags. That's step number one. Step number two, is this intentional? Is it a choice they're making? Or do they just not know? Maybe you can host a lunch and learn on correct semantic tag usage. And then also, if you want to scare them a little bit, point to the accessibility thing. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. Cool. Any other questions? Thanks for making me dizzy. I appreciate it. Yeah.